Can you trust the people around you? There are about 25 to 50 active serial killers living in the United States right now. A serial killer is someone defined as taking the life of another person or thing for having certain characteristics. This does not mean that you are automatically killed just by living in the United States, but it does make you wonder who you can trust. Some serial killers have never been identified, one of those being the Zodiac Killer. He is known for using his murders as his claim to fame. My name is Presley Stites, and I will be discussing the Zodiac Killer today, who he is, who his victims were, what messages he sent to the police and news stations, and potential behaviors to look out for when dealing with a serial killer. My sources I will be using today are The American Serial Killer by John Jenkins, The Zodiac Killer by Crime Museum, and a biography called Zodiac Killer by A&E TV. These are a few good sources just because they all give me different information, all discuss the dark and heinous crimes that he committed, and are all very reliable sources. Learning about the Zodiac Killer is very relevant in today's news. There's lots of killing going on, and just being aware of your surroundings is more important than ever. These heinous crimes were committed by people who I'm sure were not ready for the end to come so soon. Death is defined as the end of life of a person, or the destruction and permanent end of something. Today I'm going to speak about who the Zodiac Killer is, the victims' lives he took during October 1968 through December 1969, and what messages he left behind. First, we will discuss who the Zodiac Killer is. Second, we will discuss who the victims are, what happened to them, and where this happened, and the dates that it happened. Next will be the encrypted messages and phone calls that he left at the news stations and police stations in the Northern Californian area. And lastly will be major signs and red flags of killers and sociopaths. Now we are able to discuss who the Zodiac Killer is. Throughout the years of 1968 through the year 1969, at least 5 lives were claimed by a man named the Zodiac Killer. These murders happened in Northern California in the cities of Benicia, Vallejo, Noa County, and San Francisco. The Zodiac Killer made it an effort to get his name out there. These murders were his claim to fame, and he loved getting the attention. He would send in letters to the local news stations and even call the local police stations, teasing them that they were not able to identify him yet. There were only a few suspects who were ever convinced the police that they potentially might be the Zodiac Killer. One of those being Arthur Lee Allen. Arthur had many arrest warrants that made him a very plausible suspect to the police. His friends and family also claimed that he was the type to kill. One of them even said they heard him say that he was the one responsible for the murders. He lived in the area of Vallejo and lived about 5 minutes away from one of the actual crime scenes. He had many charges of sexual assault and was fired as a teacher because he was sexually assaulting a student. He also had a watch that was the brand of a Zodiac, and many other things that just made police very suspicious of this man. A former detective later released that through a DNA test from the letters and everything, it was no possible way that it was Allen. Even though so many things lined up, it was just not him. There was no way. Now we are able to discuss the victims of the Zodiac Killer, and I will warn you, this does discuss how they were killed. The first victims lives were claimed on December 20th, 1968 on Lake Herman Road. The Zodiac Killer had pulled up to David Faraday's parked car, and in the passenger seat was Betty Lou Jensen. He had then proceeded to leave and then came back 5 minutes later and parked directly behind David's car. he got out of the car, and as David was stepping out of the car as well, the Zodiac Killer killed him by shooting him in the head. Betty Lou ran from the car, fleeing the scene, and was shot 5 times in the back while fleeing. On July 4th, 1969, at Blue Rock Springs Park, another teenage couple was parked in their car just hanging out one night before a play when the Zodiac Killer got out of his car, walked over, and shined a flashlight in Miss Darlene Farron's passenger side window. While doing so, she rolled down the window, and that's when the Zodiac Killer shot 9 bullets into the car, most of them hitting her first and then going into Michael McGew. Michael McGew did survive this and was able to give the police a good description of the Zodiac Killer, but they were never able to find the man. On September 27th, 1969, in Lake Bernessa, 2 college students were picnicking out by the lake, a few miles from their home or from their car. Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell were then approached by the Zodiac Killer. He claimed that he was a escaped convict from the Colorado area and said that if they would cooperate and give him their car, then he would be on their way. He forced Cecilia to tie up Brian. While she was being tied up herself, the Zodiac checked Brian's ties and they were loose, which caused him to go in a frenzy, and then he ended up stabbing Cecilia 10 times and then stabbed Brian 6. Brian did survive this and gave another very good detailed description of the Zodiac Killer as well, but unfortunately he was never found. Then on October 11th, 1969, a taxi driver was driving a white male to the Paradiso area when all of a sudden he was shot and killed about a block from where the destination was. This was witnessed by 3 other teenage boys who did see the Zodiac Killer fleeing the car, but the description they gave, since it was dark outside, was that it was a black male. So the police ran straight by the Zodiac Killer while he was fleeing the scene without ever knowing, because they were given the description of a black male. These are the only known victims of the Zodiac Killer, but he did claim to have murdered 37 other people, and there are a few cold cases where they believe the Zodiac Killer may have been responsible for those as well. So, with all of this information, you can see how relentless and how emotionless the Zodiac Killer is when just taking the lives of other people. Now we will discuss the messages sent to the local news and police stations by the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer craved attention. He did most of his work for fame. He wanted to be famous, and for some reason he chose murders and killing people to be his claim to fame. When his first murders did not really get spoken about, he went ahead and killed a few more people, and then he sent a letter to 3 different news stations in the California area. One was the San Francisco Chronicle, the other was the San Francisco Examiner, and the third was the Vallejo Times, my bad. In these messages, he claimed that if they did not post about his murders, at least the first one, on the front page of their next newspaper, then by the end of the weekend they would have at least 12 more bodies to deal with. The San Francisco Chronicle did indeed post about his murders in their next weekly newspaper, and so no more bodies were found by the police that we know of. These messages were encrypted. Most of them are still unidentified. He claimed to have left his identity in one of them, but no one has been able to translate it yet. In one of his letters, he addressed himself as the Zodiac, and that's where his name came from. No one really knows more other than that. he sent to the San Francisco Examiner. He stated in his letter, "Dear editor, this is the Zodiac," and just left it as that. And then from then on, he did address himself as the Zodiac. He would make calls to the local police stations claiming that he was the Zodiac. We're not sure 100% if that was him or not, but according to the police, they do believe it was him. He would tease them and mock them for not having figured out the letters yet and not figuring out his identity, which did cause a bit of a problem in the police station. On one of the victim's cars, he left the message saying Vallejo /12-20-68, which is a date, and then another /7-4-69, which is another date, and then he put 6:30 by knife, which was one of the killings. 50 years later, they have just found out in 2020 what one of his messages were. It was just mainly another mocking letter encrypted message that we do not still have his identity left. So they are just still working away, which is good to know that it's not a cold case quite yet. They still are trying to find something. Hearing about those previous messages showed just how cocky the Zodiac Killer was. It shows that he did not care to confront the police and tease them, but it did show that he still had a little bit of scared feelings, I guess I would say, because he still wanted everything to be encrypted, which meant it was the police taking longer time to figure everything out. Now we are able to talk about some behaviors of serial killers and some signs to look out for. A few behaviors that you might want to be aware of when dealing with a potential serial killer would be that they love having that power over another person. They love the dominance of it. It makes them feel powerful. Typically because they grew up in a poor home life where they were not dominant. They were very submissive. They were taught to be obedient and were either disciplined to be that obedient person or just were not loved enough to where they could have that feeling of loving another person. Another thing to look out for is them striving to be alone. If somebody, some people like to be alone, but then there's that always being alone, never being around friends or family. And then there's also the torturing of small animals. That I think is a very big giveaway, torturing them with no remorse. A few statistics about this is that 40% of all murderers do get away with the crime, which that's a lot higher than it needs to be in my opinion. And then overall, majority of serial killers have been men. And there's Ted Bundy, there's John Wayne Gacy, there's Jeffrey Dahmer, and then many believe Jack the Ripper is a male as well. He was a serial killer in England area who also was never identified. The United States has the highest number of serial killers at the moment. And then another fact, but it's a little better, is that over the past few decades, the killing rate has fallen over 85%, which is astonishing. That's very good. I mean, as good as it can get. In summary of my presentation, I spoke about who the Zodiac Killer is, his victims, his encrypted messages that were sent to the local police and news stations, as well as some behaviors to look out for during early childhood adolescence that could potentially lead up to becoming a sociopath. Though the Zodiac Killer most likely has passed away, people are still looking to identify him, and I believe that is the best part of this story because it might bring some family members of the victims to peace and being aware that people are not always who they seem to be, which I think is probably one of the biggest lessons here. A famous quote from a serial killer I'm sure most of you know would be that we serial killers are your sons, we are your husbands, we are everywhere, and there will be more of your children dead tomorrow, by Ted Bundy. And with that, I think I'll bring this to a close, and just be safe, everyone.